All right. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I'd like to give a few housekeeping tips before we get started. The recording has now started, and the audience has been placed on mute. If you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to place them in the IM box located on the left-hand bottom corner, and I will interrupt our presenter and give him your questions. We will be also sending out the recording after the webinar is over to you all. Thank you.
Hi everyone, this is Reed Weedor. I'm the Chief Technology Officer here at New Signature, and today I'm going to be talking to you about using a new tool from Microsoft called Power BI to help you gain rich business insights in a way that, quite frankly, in the past was prohibitive for many organizations, especially organizations that couldn't afford to leverage a very expensive custom package for their needs. So whether you're a CFO or a business analyst, or even someone working on the CRM side of the coin in the sales or marketing or customer service side of the business, Power BI has a way to make all of that rich data that lives out there more useful to you. So let's get going. So I think one thing that we're all keenly aware of is that the world of data is changing. The total amount of data that's increasing every single year is getting larger and larger. And a lot of that data is not from traditional data sources. When you think about 5 or 10 years ago, the types of data that exist today in large quantities, videos, sales data, data from devices that people have, data from the Internet of Things, those simply didn't exist 5 or 10 years ago. And today, those sorts of devices and the data that they're producing is growing like gangbusters. The other key change in the world from 5 or 10 years ago is that more often than not, consumerization is driving a change in how that data is being created as well as how it's being consumed. In the past, businesses were the ones that were primarily driving this growth in data. When you think about 15 or 20 years ago, most organizations, most enterprises were the ones that were generating large databases based on the data that they had, that they kept very secret themselves. Today, consumers are the ones who are driving this data growth because they all own multiple devices. They're all using social media to provide feedback on the services that they're getting, that they're purchasing and working with. And all of that work that they're doing is creating not only the increase in data, but it's also changing the way that people consume that data. The days of saying that only a business or only a database administrator would have access to this data are gone. People want to have access to that data regardless of where they are and regardless of what device that they're using. This really feeds into Microsoft's productivity vision. Rather than saying only certain types of people can have access to that data, Microsoft is really saying that by democratizing the whole data consumption model, everyone can get rich insights. Whether you're on a mobile device or a tablet or a laptop, it doesn't matter. You should always be able to get access to these insights. And whether you want to stand up these services in your own environment or even hosted with a cloud provider such as Microsoft, or even a hybrid model where some of that is being done on premises and some of it is being done on the cloud. All of that is something that you can consume with Microsoft solutions. So today we're here to talk about Power BI. And for a lot of customers, the first question is, well, what is it? And Power BI is roughly divided into two separate components. It's a self-service business intelligence solution delivered through both Excel and through Office 365. It has the ability to give information workers rich data analysis and visualization capabilities to help you identify deeper business insights, either within your own environment or a trusted cloud environment. And the great thing about using Power BI with Office 365 is that you can connect to that data in the cloud, or you can actually extend the existing data living within worksheets, databases, you name it, up to the cloud to allow a self-service business intelligence solution to give you those insights in real time. What does Power BI let you do? Well, it lets you do a lot of things. We're going to focus on a couple of key areas. First, it helps you analyze and present insights from your data in compelling visual formats in Excel itself. So you don't have to use a specialized tool. You don't have to go out there and be paying $1,000 a month for some service that you have to learn about. You can use the tool that you're familiar with, Excel, to get these insights. You can choose to share those reports and data with data that's always kept up to date. I can't tell you how many customers I've walked into that thinks that they have a great business intelligence solution. And when I say, okay, I'd like you to show me, they immediately say, okay, let me find that Excel worksheet. Okay, let me remotely connect to a person's workstation or a file server. And that process of obtaining the data is actually longer than the analysis would be because it's stored on someone's laptop or some file server that's old or a database server that may be going away. With Power BI, all of those data sets are always online and the data is always kept up to date. You can certainly leverage the power of Excel, and if you're an Excel master, what you're going to see when we go through the demonstration is quite powerful. But if you're a C-level executive, if you're someone that isn't an Excel master, you can use Power BI with Office 365 and leverage the new natural language search to get immediate answers through interactive tables, charts, and graphs in a way that before would have required you to have a team of business analysts prepare. Once you see that, I think you'll be impressed with the speed at which you can get insights without having to go back to other individuals. And finally, you can access and stay connected to this data regardless of where you are if you're on the go through the new mobile apps that Microsoft has built. The primary goal of Power BI is to solve a business challenge. And that business challenge is that they want to enable self-service business intelligence solutions for everyday business users with the ease and use of familiarity of a tool they already use, Excel. Once you're used to using Excel, you're going to be able to move up that chain of maturity very quickly to offering more advanced capabilities than you'd have otherwise. So finally, what I'd like you guys to see as we dive into the examples, we're going to show off some of the features, then we're going to have a live demo to show you those in real time. But broadly speaking, remember, all of the capabilities in Excel are great for doing that discovery and analysis, but as soon as you want to share it, that's where you're going to use the 365 Power BI sites to do that. And all of this, if you take away one thing from this webinar, all of this is available for a free preview if you go to www.office.com/Power BI. So we're going to dive into the Excel side of the coin first. One of the first tools that's baked into Excel is a tool called Power Query. Power Query allows you to go out and find data. That data could be on the internet. That data could be in a database in your environment. It could be on an Excel worksheet sitting on your laptop. It could be an Exchange server or a Facebook server or even an HD Insight service or Hadoop. All of those data sources can be queried by Power Query and hooked into your data model. And that's one of the most powerful features of Power Query is that before you had to think, where was I going to be able to get the data? Now with Power Query, you can actually publish a corporate catalog of all the data sources in your environment to make it very easy to surface where that data is within your existing system. Once you've queried that data, you can do repeatable processes to clean it up. Many of the people I know who are business analysts spend a majority of their time performing very, very rote tasks, changing the names of columns, changing the types of columns, building custom columns. That sort of work is drudgery, data drudgery. With Power Query, you can automate those tasks to ensure that as the underlying data sources change, you don't have to go back and re-clean up the data. It does it on the fly for you. It's an incredibly powerful feature that I'm going to show off for you in a minute. All of those sources that you connect to with Power Query can be linked with the new in-memory module in Excel 2013. This allows you to set up relationships within those existing data sources. I might be grabbing an Excel worksheet and hooking it into my CRM system. I might be grabbing my HR system and hooking it into another line of business app that's developed, or even a flat file database or an Access database. Once I've modeled those relationships out, I can then grab the insights that are a result of that. From a visualization perspective, Microsoft has done a lot of work to make sure that the insights are a key component. It's great to be able to get the data, but as many business analysts will attest, simply having access to the data isn't in and of itself an insight. Realistically, you need to massage the data, you need to map it, you need to track it, you need to chart it. Once you build those charts up with Power View, it's much easier to see what the insights are. And that's the goal of any good business analyst, is to get to the point that that long table of numbers actually provides a compelling narrative. You don't have to be Edward Tufte to appreciate the fact that when you see a chart with a line going up from left to right, you understand that that means growth. And it's very easy to see that. But to be able to identify that growth in a long, dense table is tough. And that's where Power View can help you build it out. Some of that data is geographical, and we'll go over the new feature called Power Map that actually ties an entirely visual environment to the data that you have. This could be sales data from CRM, it could be customer service data, it could be positive reviews on Twitter, you name it. As long as you have a geographical component to your data, you can use Power Map to visualize that on a globe, on a single state level, or even a custom map. You could be visualizing a Wi-Fi strength signals or a campus map of your environment and where heat is being used. All of that is capable through the Power Map plugin. So let's dive right into it. We're going to actually show off those Excel features. Once we go through the Excel side of the coin, we'll flip back over into Office 365. But let's get this ball rolling with a Excel worksheet. And I'm going to start with a blank worksheet. So as you can tell here, I'm running a very simple copy of Excel. It's got the new capabilities built into it through Power BI, and it's leveraging some of those shared features as well. If I look into it, into the Power Query item, it's actually just an item on the ribbon. So I'm not having to learn a completely new tool to be able to take advantage of it. I can see at a glance I've got a variety of different places that I can pull information from to be able to
You will
source
now
it
be placed into conference.
into my worksheet.
To mute your line, press *6.
So
To
one of the
unmute,
items that's
press
contained within here
#6.
is online search. This is as simple as it sounds. I can come in here and start typing in, energy consumption, for instance, and it will actually go out and look on the internet for potential data sources for me to grab. You'll notice as you hover over these items, it'll actually say the location of each one. This one is coming from the World Bank. This one is coming from Wikipedia. I've got another one from Wikipedia here. When you think Wikipedia, most of us think fairly poorly maintained data. You know, a lot of people are editing it. It's in a table. You don't know what that format is. By hovering over it, it's relatively easy to see what type of data is contained within these sources, as well as the underlying columns that are contained within it. But even a data source like this, like Wikipedia, I can choose to actually hit edit, and it will bring up the Explorer mode for me to be able to massage the data that's contained within here. So all of this data is data that I'm pulling from an online public web source. This could be data that I pulled from an on-premise server or a database server or the like, but I've chosen to pull it from an online source. Once you've got the data in Data Explorer, this is when that massaging and what I like to think of as that data grunt work takes place typically. If you had pulled this into Excel, you might spend an hour or 2 hours simply getting the data to look the way that you might want it to look. I could come in here and change some of these column names. I could say, oh, this is actually the 1990 energy column. I can come in and change this particular name to say, oh, this is actually the country name. I can move some items around, so I can say, well, it's more important to have this population figure at the top. Now, you'll notice as I'm starting to make changes to these data columns that it actually is keeping a track of everything that I'm doing here in the right-hand side. Each of these steps I can go back to and see the data as I've made changes to it. The great thing about that is as I start to format this, and I can actually, it goes beyond formatting, I can change the type of data, I can make this an actual number, I can change it to a decimal number. As you move through there, it will make changes to the environment so that I can later have a repeatable process to get where I need to be. So as you look through here, I've made a number of changes through the document. If I want to, I can go into what's known as the advanced editor and see all of those changes that I've made in a single text-based manner. So it's quite easy for me to bring this up and see this is the data that I've changed. I could take this query and send it to someone else, and they could edit it and make another change. Let's look at another place that I can get data from. I'm going to go ahead and load this into the environment so that you can see what it looks like just out of the gate. This is a free plugin that you can add in and turn on in Excel, so anyone can go out there and get access to this data. When you start to look at the data columns that are contained here, I've also got a little item here that says this is the regional energy use. And if you look at the numbers here, this preview is actually showing me a rich preview based on the data changes that I made to the underlying sources. This is connected to Wikipedia. Wikipedia is often updated. All I have to do to update this is to actually select this button that says refresh, and it will go out and refresh the data from the underlying data sources and apply the changes that I have to it once again. So when you think about those types of dull data drudgery tasks that some of your business analysts are performing, a lot of it is because every time the data source is updated, they have to go back and reformat everything. With Power Query, all of that can be done in real time, and I can see the results of it simply by hovering over this. This preview is not a preview of what the data source looks like. This is a preview of what the data looks like after I've manipulated it. So I've shown off an online ability to be able to query this information. What if I want to pull from another source? I obviously can choose to pull from a specific website. I might want to build this from an Excel sheet, for instance, or a CSV file if I had some legacy CSV files kicking around. I can connect into a variety of databases, everything from a SQL server to an Oracle database to an Azure SQL database to even things that are more far afield, a Sybase or a Teradata or even an Access database. All of those can be hooked into Power Query. When you start looking at some of the other items, I've got some items from SharePoint. I could hook into a Hadoop. I could actually pull from Azure Blob Storage or even AD Exchange or SAP. All of those different systems allow me to pull data from my environment. Let's say that I've made a couple of pulls in the past and I want to go back to them. I can just go to recent sources and see that list of all the data sources that I pulled from. So I've got one here at the top that is actually connecting me to my CRM system. So I've got a CRM system that I'm connected to. It will go in there and pull that data from the entire CRM system so that I can go through and actually get the information that I need to provide to others. Now you can see at a glance, it's already connecting me to my navigator screen, and within a few seconds I'll be able to pull this down and get access to all of my tables within my CRM instance. Now we happen to be using CRM in this demonstration tendency not only for sales, but also marketing efforts and customer service. So if I want to build some reports on the amount of incidents that have come into the system, you can do that. If I want to see how effective my marketing campaigns are, that information is in there. Or a more traditional use is to go in and actually pull information from your opportunity set. So what does that look like? Here is a great example. When I hover over opportunity set, I can see there's a lot of data that's within here. I've got 149 different columns alone within that particular set, which is fine. I can choose to go ahead and edit that information. If you look at that, this will bring up all of the different potential columns that I have access to. This can be overwhelming, and you'll notice here that the query editor actually truncates the amount of data that it pulls precisely because it doesn't want to overload you with data. If you're tagging into a 10 gigabyte database or a 20 gigabyte database, rather than waiting to download the entire database, it will actually do a subset of the data to get a list of all the columns, enough for you to provide and maintain the transformations that you're going to do without having to download all of that data. But you'll see here I have access to all of these columns that are contained within it. And if I choose, I can select Choose Columns, and it will come through and allow me to select individual columns that I need to. Now, one of the best things for one of these tables with 149 columns is I can also simply start searching, and you'll see that I can select a couple of columns contained within it and it will start to make those changes to the environment. Those steps, as I mentioned, are repeatable. So I can actually go in and bring up that advanced editor. In here, I'll go ahead and say View Advanced Editor. And I've got just a few columns here. Let me go ahead and grab one that I've made before and paste some of that information within here. So I've got a much richer set of actions to take. As soon as I paste those actions in, you'll notice it includes all of the steps that I have here on the right-hand side through the part of the process, and then it begins to query the information. Why is that important? Well, when you think about some of the steps that you do as a data governance person, those steps that occur at the beginning, you're going to want to filter as rapidly as possible. Rather than doing lots of processing on your end of changing column names and the like, any good data analysis begins with filtering it down to just the information you need. So in this case, I've gone through and filtered the rows as one of my first items to filter it by certain types. Then I've removed the columns that I don't need because I don't need to be pulling that data through my query. The end result is a much more tightly focused query, and this looks like what you would expect from a CRM system. I've got the name of the customer, I've got an opportunity description, the salesperson, what stage it's in, when it's going to close, and the value. So at this point, I can go ahead and load this up. And I'll say, hey, do you want to load this here? I'm going to put it in a new worksheet because I don't want to overwrite my energy worksheet. And what it will go and do is actually start to put a sample of the information. You can see it's got the preview information here, these 83 rows. While it's doing that, it's actually on the back end going through and grabbing the latest data to be able to provide up-to-date data to allow me to make changes to it. Now, this is a traditional table. So you can tell I've got the ability to sort by items. I can choose specific dates. I can look in specific months, let's say. Let's say I only want to look at this particular date in October. I can get that filter right out of the gate. Now, the ability to do this means that I can get a lot more insights than I otherwise would be able to do. Let's go ahead and put all the data back in. What I'm going to do here is a traditional pivot chart to be able to show up what that data actually looks like. I've got rich data here, and this is what many data analysts get to, is they've got it now in a massaged, ready-to-consume format. Now they're ready to get some insights. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, and as you can see, I've got some data in here. I'm going to pull some information into this pivot table right here. I've got some values. I'm going to go ahead and choose my customers, and let's go ahead and throw on my salespeople. Great. So I'm able now, with just a few button clicks, to get some rich information about the types of contracts I have out there and what customers they're for. If I notice here it's a little busy, I've got a lot of customers listed down here that's not perhaps as useful. I'm going to swap that with my legends, and then I can see, oh, this is much easier for me to see. I can actually tell who's doing a good job, who's doing a bad job, and where that information is contained. I can now, if I want to, take those insights and actually apply some filtering within it. So if you notice that I've got a close month that's able for me to filter on, or perhaps I want to close it based on the probability. So those slicing and dicing that can take place here, if I select the close probability, rather than saying all, I might want to move just to the 80% range and actually get insight there. And as soon as you do that, you can see that one of the individuals here, Kelly, is doing much better at that 80% close range. So she's got a lot of stuff that's in that ready to go to the final stage. If I flip back and say, okay, you know what, I want to be able to look at all of the items that are perhaps 80 or 100 or 60, I'll get a better view for things that are a little bit further along, but not all the way there. And I can tell that Allie's got a bunch of stuff that's in that earlier stage process. Those sorts of insights are great to get with a few button clicks. But the biggest concern that we see with many customers is after they've built all of this capability and they've been able to visualize it, they haven't been able perhaps to do as much effort with it because they need a more compelling visualization. So to do that, I'm going to actually flip back over to my sheet here where I've got a map of all of these items, including the data within here. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to build I'm going to build a power map to be able to show off the information that's contained within here. So Power Map is a separate plugin that you have to enable within the environment. What it will actually go do is look at all of the data that you have within your existing system. So if you notice here within this existing workbook, I've got a lot of data that's contained around addresses and close date and the like. And so when I launch Power Map, it'll actually come through and look at all of the different types of information that I have within it to be able to give me a single point of view for how that data is actually pulling up, which in turn will allow me to go back and then say, oh, I can look at the specific items that are contained within it. Because when you flip over to this sheet here, this is a great way of viewing what the data looks like from a salesperson perspective. I don't really have a great way of visualizing what it looks like from an actual geographical level. Whoops. And of course, always helps to be able to get your items within here. Put this over to this side. So I will come back to Power Map in an instant. While I'm doing that, I'm actually going to go ahead and flip into the next side of the Office 365 side, because for me, one of the biggest differences with the Power BI model is that even though you may have a great series of information that's contained, if you're not able to share it with others, if you're stuck saying, okay, I have a lot of this information, but it's sitting on our CFO's desk, or it's sitting on the HR individual, the director of HR's specific file share, that can be a big challenge for individuals. And that's where the Office 365 sites component comes in. So what is Power BI in Office 365? It's a couple of different components. The first is the sharing component. So that former situation I described a minute ago, where you've got stuff on Excel worksheets, on USB drives, on file servers, even in SharePoint sites, by having all of those be disparate sites, it's tough to get all the information in one single location. And that's where a Power BI site with 365 really lights up. So these sites are centrally stored. They're tied to 365 tenancies. You can add and remove data sources to them, so you can make sure that they're going to have the information contained within those Excel sheets. I can easily upload them and share them with others. It also has the ability to connect into your on-prem sources. So I showed you earlier within the Power Query plugin that you could actually hook into a SQL server or an Access database or even an Azure SQL instance. With Power BI sites, you can set up a data connector to actually act as a gateway between your existing on-premises data sources, whether it be a SQL server or a Access database, you name it, that can connect into the data gateway service, which will then take that data and surface it to an Office 365 Power BI site. So in the past, I might have had to say, hey, John Lamb, our CFO, where is that SQL server or where is that table that has that financial information? Because it's living on premises, I would have to actually poke around and find out which SQL server is hosting it, where is the database, what specific table. With Power BI sites, as you'll see in a minute, it will actually do that discovery itself as long as you've connected that data gateway service to it. One of the big benefits of moving to a Power BI site is you can also leverage the power of the cloud to do things that you couldn't do on premises. When you think about the capabilities of your existing servers and services in your environment, they're obviously tasked with some mundane things, file services, print services. Maybe you even have some advanced SQL reporting baked into it. But what you don't have is the ability to scale up and down as necessary based on the workload that's attacking it. Microsoft has made a huge investment in data centers across the globe to give them that capacity to scale up and down as necessary. And one of the big benefits of that push to expand their capabilities has been natural language search capabilities. So once a data source is connected to a Power BI site, and that source could be an Excel workbook, it could be an on-premises SQL server, you name it, regardless of where the source is, as long as it's tied into 365, once I start typing a question into the Q&A section, the actual natural language service on the back end will look at the question that I've asked and try to determine what specifically, in terms of a query, what kind of query am I trying to ask? It'll actually detect the type of words that I'm using and say, oh, you were looking for the number of gold medals by country in 2008, but the query that I'm going to suggest is show medal count in country where year is in 2008. Now that language, that syntax is something that I would never use. I would never use that very stilted SQL kind of query syntax. But by typing it in a regular way and it knowing how to interpret it, it can actually generate that data for me on the fly. And then, best of all, based on the underlying data sources, suggest the visualization for me. So if I'm looking at something that has geographical data, it'll show me in a map. If I'm looking for something that works best in a clustered column bar, it'll show that. If I'm looking for something that would be best represented by a pie chart, it'll show me that. It can choose how to show that. Now, you retain the ability to customize that, as you'll see, so you don't lose the ability to switch what types of visualizations it uses, but it gets smarter as you use it more. Finally, one of the big benefits of using the Power BI sites with Office 365 is that you're able to surface those reports on any device that has HTML5 support. So whether it's a laptop or a tablet or a slate or a big display in your office, as long as it can support HTML5, you'll be able to view those Power View reports. There's also a dedicated mobile BI app that you can use to install to actually consume those reports themselves. So that app has the ability to go offline. You can save your favorites to it. It's a great way, especially for executives, to be able to get quick answers to their questions without having to flip through a series of web pages to get there. So let's go ahead and show off what those self-service sites look like. So I'm going to go ahead and flip over to my Power BI site already in action. So here we go. Here's our Power BI site. And let me flip over to the top level. Great. So as you can tell, if you've used Office 365 before, or even if you've just seen SharePoint or SharePoint 2013, this will look somewhat familiar to you. It's a standard looking SharePoint site. I've got access to all of my traditional Office 365 services here at the top as well. And you'll notice at the top, I've got a number of featured reports. So when you have Power BI sites, you have the ability to do data governance. And you can have data administrators who come in and say, these are the reports that more people want to see, so we're going to promote them to a featured report. You can imagine there might be one on the financial health of your organization that people are always looking at. There might be one on recent sales wins that your sales team is looking at. You might even, if you're a customer service organization, have a report that showcases the number of satisfied customers you have on a regular basis, or how well you're keeping to your SLAs in your CRM system for incidents. Below featured reports, we have a section for featured questions. So as you'll see when we go into the natural language area, any question that people determine is a useful question that people are asking over and over again, I've got show sales by month here as an example, or so sales promotion by discount. A data governance administrator can come in and say that that particular question is useful enough and people have asked it enough, and this is true of the entire Power BI suite. You can actually see how many times people are asking questions, and if there's 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 questions that are getting surfaced over and over again, you can promote those to a featured question to ensure that people can ask it immediately out of the gate. When you go down into the individual items beyond the featured reports and featured questions, you'll see there's a whole wealth of documents that are contained within the Power BI environment. And all of these show you who posted them, when they were posted, and for any specific one, you can actually come in here and do some additional items. You can add it into those featured reports. You could actually remove it from natural language query. So if there's a report that's posted in there that shouldn't be shared, you can remove those results from the natural language query. You can schedule it to have a data refresh. So you can say, hey, this data is something we update once a month, so I'm going to go ahead and schedule that to occur, or you can remove it entirely. When you think of what the access rights are, you're only allowed to see the data that you have access to. So if I open up an Excel worksheet and I can't connect to the underlying source, I'm not going to be able to pull out that data. Beyond those documents, you also have the ability to upload standard documents within here. I can put reports in here. I can actually use connections to be able to build in rich data models as well. And all of that ties into the data connection that you've connected in earlier. So let's go ahead and show off the natural language search. I can, if I want to, go ahead and select one of these featured questions. I'm going to choose to show sales by month. This will actually bring me into the natural language search section of the environment. So you can tell right off the gate, I've typed in show sales by month. That isn't the right query syntax. The query syntax is really show sales and month. But that doesn't ring true for me. And this is true when you build these featured questions. You want the featured questions to look like what someone might ask, rather than using the very formulaic query language for it of show sales and month. I'm going to say, hey, show me the sales by month. That makes it really easy for me to get some rich information in here. But I don't have to stop with that. It'll actually give me some suggestions to say, oh, I could show sales by the month and the year. And it'll actually give in and give me a little more detail. Or I could say, show me the sales by month and year, and I want to add products. So you can add all of those components. And products is a great example. As soon as you start to type in this information, it says, hey, look, you've got too much data contained within here. I mean, there are just far too many products listed that the phone company and Contosa are building to be able to give you any meaningful amount of data. At that point, I can roll over here to my filters list and choose to filter based on the total number of products that I have. So in this case, it's saying all, but I might want to pull in a few key products to look at them to get some better insights. And with that, it makes it very easy for me to see this white model and the black model of this particular Windows phone are the ones that are selling the best. But in this case, they've actually got a pretty steady decrease down from their initial high. So it might be time to introduce a new model to be able to provide that. I can also compare that to the other models that are being sold by a competitor of ours, the phone company. And when I start adding those in, I realize, wow, the phone company really doesn't have any winning products. Almost all of these are fairly minimal in comparison. So those insights are insights that I didn't have to build a report to get. They just naturally arose through working inside the site. By putting this in, I also get the ability to see where they're pulling the data from. So in this case, it's pulling from a specific Excel file that's been uploaded. If you had your SQL server connected in, it might suggest that. All of that is part of the ability to get greater insights into the system. I can also flip back just to the featured questions to say, hey, I'd like to see sales in the United States by state. This is a great example, again, that showing sales in state where country is United States is kind of a very limited way of looking at it. I'm not going to be able to remember that query, but I can say just show me the sales by state. And if I choose, this is a rich map, so I can actually zoom in or zoom out to get additional information on that particular item. Makes it very easy to get information without having to dig through it. And I can see our biggest sales are obviously in California, but Washington has a number of wins, and there's actually a huge amount of sales that are occurring in the eastern seaboard along the I-95 corridor as well. If I want to, if I hit show, I can also flip this into those other charts. So I can look at the underlying table to see the information. I might want to put it into a line chart to see who's selling the best. I can see here California is obviously rocking it, but Texas and Washington also have a high ways as well. Or I can go into a pie chart to bring that in. So that data is purely on my own. I haven't gone in to look in to be able to have that. I think here we have a question.
Yes, we have a question. So Zakia would like to know if we can point these natural language queries out right from the dynamic CRM.
I'm sorry, Jasmine, could you speak up a bit? I apologize.
Sorry about that. Can you point these natural language queries right from dynamic CRM?
So the natural language query is going to hook into wherever you have your data source. So if you have the data source connected into your CRM system, and that could be one of two ways. If you're running an on-premise version of CRM, you could simply hook it into the database. Otherwise, if your CRM system has a exposed API to get that data, so in this case, when I was using Excel to connect into my environment, there's an item called OData, and I can actually choose to surface the OData from within there, and it will allow me to pull that data down from the CRM system. So it's a little bit dependent upon which CRM system you're using, but as long as you can get access to it either in the database itself or within the OData feed, you can definitely get it.
Okay, and can you have them show up in the CRM dashboard as well?
So from a CRM dashboard perspective, and this is probably the differentiator, I would say. If all you're doing is pulling data from CRM into a dashboard, that's something that you can do probably within the CRM system itself with a minimal amount of effort. Where I would see you using Power BI is one of two different areas. One, if you need to hook in that CRM data with another system. So if you're tracking your sales wins in CRM, but you're tracking compensation in a financial system, and you want to keep those two together in some way, that's where Power BI would be able to surface it through the Power BI sites. If you're ultimately just trying to pull data from within CRM to another place within CRM, you probably wouldn't need Power BI to do that, although it certainly helps make that process easier. You could simply build an actual component within CRM to do that actual work. These Power BI sites themselves are merely expressions of the data, though. So at the end of the day, if you wanted to, if you go back to those Excel worksheets that are at the top level of the sites, those sites themselves are sites that honestly you could actually get the data from it and give it to someone as an Excel worksheet. And they could do whatever they want to with it. If you developed a Power View or a Power Map, they could consume that on their mobile device, for instance, without needing anything else.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions about that component?
Nope, that's it for now.
Great. So if you are selecting those reports, for instance, I mentioned these are the featured reports that we covered earlier. These reports are capabilities that will allow you to easily go in and pull in information to be able to highlight what's inside your environment. Now, this report is a report that is based on Excel, based on the work that people have done to build it. But once it builds out, you'll be able to get that rich intelligence within the environment without having to, again, be the person who necessarily created that document. And that's a big difference, because if you're a executive or someone who's used to consuming the data is great. If I need to have someone build something quickly, I'm probably going to use that natural language search capability to see if I can get an answer to my problem quickly. If it's not able to answer my problem quickly, that's when I would go to a business analyst and say, hey, I'm looking for a more robust report. Let's say this tweet report. The natural language capability is going to be able to give me some of this information, but it's not going to build out a report that gives me this color coding and the ability to look inside each one very granularly. That's something that someone would need to actually configure to build. But this ability to go through and look through at specific times and go through it is something that a business analyst might build for me using Power View in Excel and then upload it to the Power BI site for me to be able to consume. I can do all the slicing and dicing myself. I don't need to have any other capabilities within it. I can choose to filter by a specific country, for instance. I can actually look at other countries. I can pull that information, look and see what's negative versus positive versus neutral. All of that can be done myself without knowing the underlying Excel data that this is pulling from. I can finally, this is great if I'm using a web app, I can finally use an actual app that's a dedicated app. So this is the Power BI app that's contained within the environment. This app allows me to very easily, let me make sure I'm sharing that, okay. Flip over to my app. This app allows me to very easily see all of those reports that have been built up previously and cached in online mode. And I can, if I want to, drill down into any specific one to get the reporting and charting that I might need to. Again, this is more of a consumption app. As a C-level executive, someone is going to build this app using Excel first and then share it on the Power BI site. And then I'm going to go out and consume that. But I don't have to know Excel at all to be able to consume this. I can easily filter this on any touch-capable device to be able to say, I'm going to bring this in, I'm going to look at specific countries or specific areas. In this case, I've got these countries are the ones that it's currently filtered for, but I could pull that off and pull all of the countries that were potentially in the mix to be able to look at it. You can see at this graph, this isn't a very compelling graph when I've got all of that information in there, but as soon as I start to filter it by country, it makes it a lot easier to say, let's look at a few key ones that are going to be able to provide me some interesting information. If I was looking at Angola, I might think, wow, Angola is in really bad shape. They're producing a lot of CO2 emissions. As soon as I start to add in a country like Brazil, it becomes clear, hey, Angola is actually doing great. They're not doing a bad job at all in terms of their total carbon emissions looked at from the high level. When I add in another country like China, that even makes Brazil look very small. So those insights can be very easy to put together, again, without knowing all of the underlying components that bring this to bear. So to recap what we've discussed today, there are two principal components of the Power BI solution. There's a powerful self-service BI component in Excel 2013 using Power Query, Power Pivot, Power View, and Power Map. All of those components allow you, as a business analyst, to more quickly go through and get the data that you need in a repeatable format in a way that you can deliver rich insights as an individual. Once you've got those insights and you've determined what your strategy is, once I've looked at that and said, you know what, I've determined that China is pumping out a lot of CO2, that's when you want to share it and use the rich collaboration within the Power BI sites in Office 365. So those Power BI sites allow you to share that data and to share it with individuals not only through Excel reports, but through your on-premises and cloud-based data sources, whether it's CRM or SQL, you name it, those sources can hook into your Office 365 Power BI site. And once they're there, once you've linked them in, that's when you can use the really powerful feature of natural language query to start getting insights from your information more rapidly than you otherwise would be able to do. I've lost track of the times in the past that I've asked for a particular report. Perhaps it's on utilization or efficiency or the number of incidents in my environment. And in the past, I've always had to ask a person to put together that report. As long as those data sources are surfaced within a Power BI site, I can just type that into my natural language query and immediately get the answer that I need without taking up any time. And finally, to be able to access that on the go or on a variety of devices, whether it's a Windows 8 or an iOS device, you can use the mobile app and you can use HTML5 to pull that up. So we've covered a lot of ground. If there were any other questions, I'd love to have those. Otherwise, I'm happy to give you guys a few minutes back.
Okay, it doesn't look like, oh wait, we have someone typing. Oh, great presentation, Reed. So thank you again to Reed, and thanks for everyone who joined us this evening. If you missed any parts of the presentation, we'll be sending out a link for you to view. So have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.